Welcome back to the Voice of Business podcast. We're here at Bennett's Furniture and Mattresses. A big thanks to them for sponsoring this and to Phil Jolliker, the marketing guy, for shooting today's podcast. My guest today, Matt Strano. You're the CEO at Charlotte Products. You've got your hands in a few different businesses through that. Give us a bit of overview of what Charlotte is and what companies that works with.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me today. This is great. And so Charlotte, what do we do at Charlotte? So we say we make people, we create healthy spaces for people everywhere. And how do we do that? Well, we're a chemical formulator, manufacturer of professional cleaning products. And we've been in existence we're almost close to 40 years now. Okay. Head office is in Peterborough, Ontario, Fisher Drive. Yep. And we also have manufacturing in our toll relationship in Chicago with our own warehouse and staff in Chicago for our U.S. business. And I think people in the industry would know us as, we'd be like the pioneers. We're known as innovators of bringing effective cleaning products to our customers who then create healthy spaces.
Yeah. And so right now we're going through some interesting economic times, but as a business that's been around for almost 40 years, this isn't your first rodeo on that. I mean, this one is unique, but there's been a lot of ups and downs over the years. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what it's taken to get through all these challenges and build a resilient business like Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at how do you get through these challenges? I think it's experience, right? Experiences give you that knowledge to then navigate through. And I think if I look at what we've done, we've learned, and I think businesses that are successful by when times are good, right, and everything's going along, people, the good businesses, that's where anxiety happens. And what you have to do is create the anxiety to say, hey, listen, how do I pivot? How do I keep pivoting my business to mitigate risk down the road? Yeah. When a crisis happens, it's kind of too late. So what Charlotte's always had that culture of always that anxiety of what's next, what's the next trend, and what could we do in the future to mitigate risks of, if it is a pandemic or if it is tariffs, how can our business be positioned to limit the impact of what could happen in the future?
Yeah. Well, and so going to the crisis of the day right now, you guys pride yourselves on being very local and very Canadian in your production, but manufacturing is largely a global market, right? Yeah. Between your exports and inputs on it. So where do you fit in on this, and how are things affecting your business?
Yeah, well, right now I would say the whole talk of the tariff hasn't really impacted us in terms of financial because they're on and off again, but yeah. Really time. Like it's been I'm not going to say distraction, but we can't go a minute without talking tariffs in our business right now. So a lot of time in planning and what if scenarios. Now, what do we learn though? Like if I go back to my earlier answer about resilience, what did we learn at COVID? COVID, we learned that we had a gap in our supply chain. Yeah. So we pivoted a lot of our business. We always were very strong in buying from Canadian vendors, but we pivoted a lot more of our business back to domestic supply during COVID because we had a gap in supply chain then. Yeah. To the point of, we're very proud, and we have a great partner in Merit. We started our own blow molding business for our packaging, our bottles, because we couldn't get that at COVID. Yeah. So now we're in a situation with tariffs. Well, we don't buy bottles from the U.S. anymore. If we did, we'd be in a pretty challenging position right now if we were getting tariffed on bottles. Yeah. But 80% of our input costs right now are from Canadian vendors. Now, the only challenge we have, too, is we don't know what our Canadian vendors' impact are going to be on tariffs because we don't know what their purchases of the U.S. material are to make the product. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we've got 80. The other 20% are from, will impact us. We've got some what-if scenarios. But the one thing that we do have going for us, too, for exporting is we have a weaker Canadian dollar as well. So we can mitigate that as well with our exporting into the U.S. because we'll have a stronger dollar.
Yeah, it gives them a little bit more buying power despite your product now going up in price, right? Yeah. Value drops a little bit that way. What are some opportunities? I mean, with every new set of challenges, there are opportunities. You talked about getting into the blow molding business as that came around. Yeah. What are some opportunities both for yourselves or just largely, do you think, across Canadian manufacturing through this?
Yeah, I mean, when there's chaos, when there's a crisis, we always look at where is the opportunity. And I think for Charlotte, if I speak to Charlotte, I think right now our number one opportunity is this Buy Canadian. I mean, not only we have some very good U.S. competitors that we compete with right now, and they have their brands in Canada, great products, but just look at the economics. I mean, if you don't produce in Canada and you're exporting or importing product in from the U.S., the dollar, number one, is a deterrent. We've got that advantage. If you slap on a tariff coming into Canada, economically, those brands from the U.S. are going to have a hard time competing in Canada. We know that. The other thing is there's an emotional charge in Canada right now to buy Canadian. So in Canada, I think we're well positioned to really be a good replacement for those U.S. brands. Now in Canada, when you ask me about Canada manufacturing, I mean, we got a short term and a long term. And if I look at short term, there's going to be some pain. Absolutely, tariffs are going to cause that. But if I look at the long term, I'm very optimistic. I look at Canada has a fantastic time right now to look at how we can pivot and really come out of this. What's Canada going to be looking like in 3 to 5 years? And we can really pivot to be a leader in, if it's manufacturing, if it could be services. There's a lot of great things in Canada that we can pivot to. And maybe this is the catalyst that's going to allow us to make that pivot. Because if we look at COVID, we had a lot of challenges, the same challenges with global supply. Pandemic is kind of like it hits and then it goes away. People are creatures of habit. So am I. Like you want to go back to routine. And how many businesses just went back to the way that they purchased pre-COVID, even though that there was a challenge with supply chain? Well, this time around, what I think we're going to learn is, unfortunately, now we're impacted every 4 years. Like one election can change the whole business landscape. So maybe this is the catalyst that are really going to look at Canadian manufacturers and businesses to pivot into more of a resilient supply chain, or businesses that are going to be flourishing for years to come.
Yeah. Okay. Now, on the export side of things, obviously there's challenges right now with exporting things to the U.S. And there's a lot of other countries out there, but they're so close, so convenient, and so large. It's a huge market compared to our own domestic one. What kind of opportunities or challenges are there with trying to go a bit more global?
Yeah, I mean, number one, our thing too is like we look at the U.S. still to this day as a really good growth market for us. Has to be because of proximity and look at the market. The market's huge. Now, 10% of our business at Charlotte is international business. So I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but the learnings that we have by maintaining that business is a couple things. Number one is if you're going to go and expand internationally, you really have to know the market. And if I relate it to what we do in our business, we make disinfectants as a product line that we do. Well, they're governed in Canada by Health Canada, in the U.S. EPA. They both have different rules. Well, if we're going to export into Poland or Taiwan, they're going to have different rules as well. So do your products, you have to learn the market, know the market, and figure out if your products even fit in that market related to our business. The other learnings, there's economic model too. You hit on it. We can transport to the U.S. We're surrounded by oceans. So if you're going to go to Taiwan or Poland, you've got a logistics challenge and cost. So how does that figure into your business model on how can you compete? There could be, now we know global trade, like is there free trade agreements that impact your products with these countries? You're going to have to figure that out as well. But then the last thing, the biggest piece is culturally. Do you know the culture? I mean, we're working with a client right now that's in Panama, and one of the challenges is language. How do we communicate is a challenge as well. It could slow down your business. So culturally, do you understand the environment, and do your products work in that culture as well? So can be done, obviously very successful global businesses, but going into new markets isn't as easy as just saying we're going to go and expand. You really have to understand that market. Yeah,
well, and as much as we might feel like we've got some differences with the U.S. right now, we have a whole lot of similarities, right? Life for an American is not that different than life of a Canadian, similar on a lot of the language stuff, right? Like there's just so much that we do have in common compared to some other markets.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. It seems like every level of government really wants to help businesses right now with all of this. What are some things that would actually be helpful that are, within our control?
Yeah, with government, I obviously crucial, right? Interesting times for them, but I think to answer that question, number one, if it's municipal, federal, or provincial, they have to be aligned. In a crisis like tariffs, I mean, we're always going to have our differences, but when you come into a crisis, you have to have alignment. You have to be in that rowboat rowing the same way. If not, it's just going to break down. So I think we're doing a good job. You see it at the federal level, provincial level, municipal. They're all, banding together, and that's good. It has to stay aligned. And I'm never been in politics. Obviously,
Sure.
we get help, but I relate politics like business, right? Like if you're running a city, if you're a municipality, a province, or a country, it's like running a business.
Yeah.
And if I relate it to what we do every single day and the value we bring to our customers, we look at it in 3 circles. One is understanding we're always looking at what's the next trend.
Yeah.
And if I look at government, right now they have to be looking at what's the next trend, short-term and long-term. Short-term, there's going to be pain. Long-term, how are we going to come out of this stronger and better? Yeah. And I think you got to engage with citizens. You got to engage with the businesses. You got to ask. You have to have the pulse on what's needed in the climate that you're governing. Yeah. The second circle we always think about once we know the trend is you got to create this best-in-class product. Yeah. Right? And so then government's got to take that trend and they got to create that best-in-class product to help and position their, if it's the province or the country, where we're going to go. And how do they do that? Well, I mean, we can invest in sustainable manufacturing if that's something that we have to invest in. R&D, how do we continue to innovate and invest in our R&D? Locally, how do we then start to get serviceable land that we can expand businesses on? Those are the things that are products that the government have to create and execute on to allow businesses to flourish and citizens to grow. And the last circle, we in our business is knowledge transfer. How do you then transfer that knowledge to our customers? And I think when I look at knowledge transfer in the government scheme is or realm, really is about our skilled labor. Yeah. Like we have great labor and we have great schools, education. We got to continue to invest in that. We got to continue to build the labor pool to be better than what it is now and continue to grow and innovate and be entrepreneurs or skilled labor for the trades. I was at a meeting last week and it was interesting because when you hear about the tariffs and what the U.S. are trying to do, there's different strategies and different thoughts. And one is obviously tariffs can drive manufacturing back to your country. And yeah. I think that's obviously one objective that the U.S. want to do. They want to drive manufacturing back, which we should be doing in Canada as well. Yeah. But it's interesting. In the U.S., the stat is 40% of their population is retired, is not a workforce. 60% are. So a lot of people, economists are saying, yeah, it's great, love that strategy. But if you don't have employees or staff to man the new jobs, you don't have a viable business or strategy. So I think that's something Canada and we really still have to really develop that pool of employees for the future.
Yeah. And is that what is the strength of manufacturing? Between the innovation, the workforce, you touched on having to be best in class. And often when I talk to our local manufacturers, the line is, well, we're not the cheapest on the market, but we provide a quality product and we have a high standard, and that's what our customers are going for. Is that sort of our niche in the world, if you will?
Yeah. Oh well. If you look at if I look at Canada, how's Canada represented in the world? And what we have going for us is we have the best brand. Yeah. And I learned that early, even when I finished university, I backpacked Europe, and you put the Canadian flag on your back, and everyone comes up and wants to talk to a Canadian. Yeah. And I think in manufacturing in the business world, Canada is known for quality, high quality goods, ethical behaviors, all the things that build up a strong brand. So people will buy from Canadians because of that reputation we have. And I learned too, I went back, at a point in my career, I went back to school and I had an opportunity to work on a year-long project with a company, Canada Goose. I think people know Canada Goose.
The jackets.
The jackets. So at that time, Danny Reese, he was second generation. He owned the business. It was still private, and I got to interact with him a lot and really learn from his story. His story really resonates with that brand message of Canada. When he took over the business from his father, they were only producing for the domestic Canadian market, and the business was struggling. It wasn't doing well. Yeah. It was his vision to then take that brand and go international. And when, I think it was, if I recall the story correctly, I think it was Sweden. It was his first international market, and he went to Sweden, obviously have the same kind of climate that we have. When they started to see these coats and the quality of the coats, the brand just took off because of the quality and because it's Canada. Yeah. And he tells that story. It wasn't, yes, he's high quality, but it's the brand of Canada internationally that really resonated with people and took his brand to the next level. Yeah. So I think Canada has a great story there to tell because people respect our brand.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier about, it's all about preparing in the good times for what's going to come ahead. In hindsight, what are the things that businesses should have or could have been doing to get ahead of what we're dealing with now with this trade dispute with the U.S. to be better positioned for it?
Yeah, I think, I look at that comment and I think of Warren Buffett and his stocks, right? What's his phrase? His phrase is that when times are good, when people are buying, I sell. Yeah. And when people are selling, I buy. Yeah. And similar to my story of what we did at Charlotte during COVID. When COVID happened, you can just imagine in our industry, cleaning industry, we were spiking, we were booming, we had bottlenecks, we couldn't get enough product out fast enough. But at the same time, we were challenged with what do we do with this gift and how do we then reposition Charlotte to come out of, what's Charlotte going to look like coming out of this? Yeah. And that's when we put the energy into making change and investing heavily in our facility. You've been there. Yeah. We're now one of the only Canadian companies to do hand sanitizer. Yeah. That was a big investment and big challenge during COVID.
Hard to spend money when things are...
and the time, right? And it's stressful for people, but it's important. Again, going and blow molding, starting a blow molding business at the same time the pandemic is. Luckily, we have a fantastic partner, Merit, that helped with the heavy lifting there. But those things are the uncomfortable, right? Like, I guess my only point back to that is when times are, change is hard, but change has to be done. And I look at my role here. One of the challenges I had when I came to this role at Charlotte was I didn't know what value I could bring in the role because I was always distribution background and it was all about execution. Yeah. But in the role now, what I've learned over time, it's about, what's the business going to look like 3 or 4 years down the road? What's the trends? Yeah. And I think that's what every business has to do, and then you have to pivot. It is tough, but you have to pivot, and I think we're in a situation now, I think everyone can recognize that we're going to pivot, and I think we're going to pivot to the better, but it's going to take hard work, and it's going to take dedication, and it's going to be tough, but it can be done.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to leave on one last question. So on that idea of a pivot, what are the things that will leave our Canadian manufacturing, Peterborough Kawartha manufacturing, in a strong position 3 to 5 years from now? What are the things that we can be doing?
I think we talked about all of it. I guess, how do I summarize that? I think, for this area, we have a huge history. We have a great history of manufacturing, right? We have resilient people, a great workforce. The one thing that's very important to state is that, and I learned it when I watched my father's generation develop businesses, and now I've gone through it, is the collaboration within our community. That's a powerful thing, is when people want to help everybody, and we have that here. So we have that formula, we have that powerful opportunity because people want to help everybody. But in summary, I think, number one, we have to continue to invest in technology and innovation. That's number one, and that goes back to support from government, support from businesses, but continue to look at that trend and innovate, develop that best-in-class product, but it's got to be investment in technology and innovation. Number two is just pivot to, how can this community develop a resilient supply chain? Yeah. Back back when I was growing up, we had a lot more manufacturing than we do now. How do we bring that back?
Yeah.
You know, how do we be creative and help everybody here and build that? You know, we've got the labor, we've got the resilient workforce. Now we just need the businesses and be creative there. Then it goes back to the workforce. We've got the schools are great here. We've got great education, develop that workforce that wants to stay here and thrive and be entrepreneurs and build the businesses. Government involvement, the support again. Yeah. The other piece on the government I want to point out too is when we invest in that best-in-class product that I talked about, well, we also have to contribute back to that. What I mean by that is we got to buy Canadian brands. We got to then support back. It's like anything in our business. If we invest in a piece of equipment, we want to know what our return on investment is. Yep. And the same with business or governments. If we're going to invest in supporting businesses, then we should invest in what's the return on investment, and that's supporting them. And then I guess the last thing I'd leave with is short term going to be tough for some businesses. Long term, have that positive energy, positive outlook, collaborate with people, learn from people, and work together and continue to be positive, because I definitely believe in 3 to 5 years, if we do things right, we are going to be a very prosperous, not only community, province, but country.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Matt. I really appreciate all that.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate the time.